going back quickly to New Atheism and your involvement in it, I saw another interview where you discussed a little bit about your involvement in the New Atheism and how, very similar to me and my journey, you kind of got involved in the final remaining years of the movement when it was still somewhat alive. Like, you wanted to put your academic talents and your knowledge into that community more, but there was no real community left. There was no vibrant reactionary movement centric community that was really there anymore come 2015-16. Mind telling us a little bit about your feelings and thoughts there?
I mean, the Atheism Plus colonized the thing from within, more or less, and destroyed it. That's the short answer to what happened. So, I mentioned a minute ago, Elevator Gate in 2011. For those people who don't know what that was, there was an incident. There was a big atheism conference. It was in Ireland at a nice hotel. So we're not talking like in some seedy, like low grade, low budget sort of like Tumblr conference or something like that. I mean, this was like, a nice place, nice hotel, first world country, the whole thing, because everything was good. And, at that point, there was already this sort of agitation movement that had begun a few years earlier with feminists who had kind of taken up a lot of post within, and also gay activists who had taken up a lot of post for reasons that are easy to figure out in the New Atheism movement. They were madly disaffected by kind of socially conservative Christianity. Women can't be pastors, gay is an abomination against the Lord, blah, blah, blah. Of course, you're going to disaffect and alienate those people, and they're going to glom onto something that is, trying to provide an answer to that genuine problem. And so they were agitating already to make sure that there were always going to be like feminist panels and how feminism is incorporated into atheism, blah, blah, blah. So there's this woman, and I guess we can name names here. There's a woman named Rebecca Watson. It's quite famous, young woman. And she gave a panel talk, if I understand the story right. I wasn't there. I'm not making that kind of claim. I had just barely become aware in the preceding 6-8 months about the atheism movement when this happened. So I certainly wasn't traveling to Ireland for big conferences or anything, or being an invited guest to anything at that point. And so she gave her panel talk. I assume it went well enough or whatever. And after parties were after parties, and everybody's having a good time. And at some point late into the evening, Miss Watson and a young man ended up on the elevator at the same time, going up to their rooms to go to bed. And the guy plucked up the courage to ask her to coffee. She said no. He said okay. He didn't stalk her to her room or come banging on her door. He just said okay. She got off at her floor. He got off at his. I don't know who got off the elevator first, but it's the end of encounter. But then she had this whole video blog she did within not very long that went out saying about how, this puts women at risk. Don't ask a woman out in the elevator. It's scary for us, yada, yada, yada. And it would have just been more stupid feminist blogging, frankly, movement agitation. But then our friend Richard Dawkins decided to make fun of it and blew it into the stratosphere. So he wrote this very famous thing called the Dear Muslima letter, where he wrote a letter to the hypothetical, young Muslim girl. Yeah, we know they're cutting your clitoris off. Yeah, we know that you're being beaten in a sack, blah, blah, blah. But did you know this poor young woman got asked out to coffee in an elevator in a beautiful hotel in Ireland? And, it's like this whole thing. I don't remember how it went, but this blew it into the stratosphere. Right. And as happens with all of these ultimately critical theory based movements, once you have an event like that brings tons of, I call them precipitating events at this point, critical precipitating events. Actually, Paulo Freire, one of the great critical theorists of the 20th century, critical education guy, he called them critical moments. And so what happens is there's some event that blows all this wide open, and then everybody has to take a side. And so once everybody has to take a side, all of a sudden everything's polarized, everybody's fighting. From 2011 forward, everybody that I knew within kind of the New Atheism space was afraid if they went to a conference, they were going to get accused of participating in rape culture or possibly raping somebody, or there's going to be some awkward encounter with some, feminist or something. And then at the same time, they were agitating, if you don't have at least 50% feminists as your speakers, then we're going to boycott your conference. And they basically killed it. It was no fun to go to conferences after that. Everybody's afraid they're going to get in trouble. Everybody's afraid there's going to be some kind of an incident. I know Peter not wanting to have any incident, and of course not being that kind of guy, he started taking his kids with him to like every conference. So now, to have like a chaperone not exactly a chaperone because it's his kids, but this ironclad excuse like, no, I wasn't in my hotel room alone with some woman. I was with my children, and so it's like, this just adds expense and complication, and you can't do the kinds of networking and things. You can't be out at the bar all night if your kids are with you, and so talking to people and hanging out. So it's like all the energy dropped out. The conference scene fell apart. Eventually they get Richard Dawkins canceled from some conference over some video he shared on Twitter comparing radical feminists to radical jihadists, and saying that basically the tenor of the rhetoric is the same. So they get him canceled. He has a stroke over the whole stress of it. It's just a nightmare, but it hollowed out the movement. There's no energy. The Atheism Plus attack dogs were after everybody. They're still doing it. It's unbelievable that they still think they're a force in the world, but they're after everybody all the time, calling everybody everything and just smearing people. And this is just what critical theory does when it gets into a movement. And so by, like you said, 2015, 16 or so, there was no movement. All that energy that had built up from 2004 or 5, when it kind of started to pick up steam, up until 2013 or so, at kind of the end of the dream. By 15, 16, it was just, there was nothing happening. There were like 2 conferences a year. Nobody wanted to go to them. They were just like a bunch of like incestuous feminism panels, because those people would bully everybody if that's like the main focus. Atheism Plus, by the way, again, you would know this, but people who might be watching might not, meant Atheism Plus social justice. They were absolutely explicit about what it meant. And so this is the milieu that we were looking at, this stupid paper about feminist glaciology. It's all tied into this social justice garbage. What is this social justice garbage? What does this mean? And, we started to study it. And so I think that wokeness killed the atheism movement much earlier than the general public, became aware that this was happening. I think, in fact, it was probably it might have been the first major thing torpedoed by wokeness, Gamergate being another example that was roughly contemporary. Really big example there too.
And it was probably really just annoying for you to see. You wanted to get more involved in that community. You wanted to go to more of these conferences, but I think you ended up seeing and talking to your colleagues, and they're ending up telling you that, there's no point at this anymore. You're going to,
it was don't go.
Me too. You could get into trouble. These organizations are losing millions of dollars, coming at it from the nonprofit perspective and the organization perspective. When I was at Reason Rally 2 in 2016, we literally pissed away millions of dollars into the reflecting pool of the Lincoln Memorial, all because Atheism Plus ended up winning at the end of the day.